was a typo, and I'm like, welcome to Comics League Movie Night. I'm Jared. It's just me today, and we are going to be discussing Avengers Confidential, Black Widow, and Punisher. So this was actually an interesting case because this was like the first time that I really watched like a Marvel anime was this movie, because what had happened was I had just played Marvel Ultimate Alliance and been like introduced. Hey, what's up, Cameron? Been introduced to like the wide world of Marvel. So I figured, okay, so this looks interesting. Plus, it had Iron Man in it, and at the time I was a massive Iron Man fan, still am. So I checked this out, and honestly, not a bad movie. It deals a lot with Frank. Obviously, Frank Castle and Natasha Romanoff are the main characters. And what I like about this, in hindsight, is they actually were respectful to Punisher as opposed to making him an idiot, which modern Marvel can learn a lot of lessons from, trust me. But yeah, this thing really, like, if you guys like Punisher, this is definitely the movie for you guys. And it's one of those films where I wish they would make more of these things, because it's 100% like one of the most actually interesting like depictions of Marvel that I have seen before. Plus, it has a lot of the anime tropes, like abnormally busty women, really crazy like sci-fi moments with the with Iron Man and the Avengers. And it's actually really cool if you pay attention to like it, and you can like get a lot of like Marvel lore. So let's break it down. So the movie, okay. So the plot begins with the Punisher breaking up a black market arms dealer, and where he is like intercepted by S.H.I.E.L.D. And Frank and Nick Fury basically tells him, "Hey, we're tracking this dude that you just killed. And normally I don't really care about you like taking out low-level guys, but now you just took out someone that directly applies to what I am looking for. So I am so you have to work for me now." So Frank agrees. He teams up with Natasha, and they're going after like this organization known as Leviathan. He who must not be named but ruined Superman probably ripped this off, as he's wont to do. And then when they reach the Leviathan base in Slovenia, they encounter someone from Natasha's past named Elias Starr. And it's essentially Egghead. So what's kind of funny about this is, so this character is brought in, and all right, so they basically make it so Natasha and him were in a relationship years before. He was presumed dead, but it's interesting knowing that that character is Egghead. I'm like, I did not know that. Funny how that kind of works out. So it turns out that Leviathan is making super soldiers, as any organization Marvel is wont to do. And what they decide is, so they're creating like basically mind controlled super soldiers similar to the Winter Soldier. In fact, this movie came out 2014. So the Winter Soldier was a character at this point, I believe so. So at this point, you also have so they go back to S.H.I.E.L.D. and they find Amadeus Cho, who is, as you guys will probably know, is not in this, but in the comics, Totally Awesome Hulk, otherwise known as Fake Hulk. So he was the all new, all different Hulk, but again, I never liked that. Would you say that Frank and Natasha is a good relationship, or should be kept to this? That's a good question. I mean, they both understand. See, here's the thing. I don't think Frank should ever be in a romantic relationship, because everything he does is linked to the death of his family. And I think he would kind of see that as a betrayal of like his devotion to his family if he like moved on. Because the minute he moves on, he has no reason to be the Punisher. And what's up, Tavia? So essentially what you're seeing here is, okay, so they meet Amadeus Cho, and he like breaks into Elias's phone, but this signals like a flash of light. And apparently that's how they like mind control people. And what that does is, so Natasha and Amadeus look away, but then Frank is technically mind control, and he goes crazy and attacks S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, kills them before he's like snapped out of it by Natasha. And then you could see it deeply affects Frank. That's like, I killed people that didn't deserve to be killed, and that kind of like messes with his head a little bit. So essentially they yeah, exactly. So then what happens is Fury orders Natasha to complete the mission on her own. She says, we can't trust Punisher. He just killed S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, regardless of the context. But Natasha breaks Frank out because she realizes she needs a partner for this mission. And they go to an auction in Madripoor. And again, what's kind of funny is seeing this movie now, because the last time I really watched it was before I like knew as much as I know now about Marvel lore. So here, like Madripoor, I'm like, okay, there you go, I get it. In case you know, Madripoor is basically an island that's like all the crime groups like hang out in. So Frank and Natasha roll out to Madripoor, and they go to like an auction with a bunch of the super soldiers, not before they're basically swarmed by them. And then they hear a bunch of like booms as they're fighting the super soldiers, and then Hulk shows up and destroys the place. And I love how Amadeus Cho is riding on Hulk like he's a horse, and they're like fighting through it. And then you discover the other Avengers are showing up. By other Avengers, I mean Hawkeye, Iron Man, Thor, War Machine, and Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers. And it leads to a pretty awesome fight scene with like all the Avengers doing combo moves. And this links to the Avengers to the Iron Man anime called Rise of the Technovore, where Frank helped Iron Man like escape from Karachi. So this is Iron Man basically repaying his debts. And I love where Frank goes, hey, this makes us even for Karachi. It's nice to see you're just as pleasant as you ever were. And then Punisher just shoots Frank and goes, and it's just nice to know that you're still bulletproof, Stark. So then what you eventually see is the Avengers like basically secure the area while Natasha confronts Elias and turns them back to their side, and they team up against basically Orion. And then Orion kills Elias, but then Punisher shows up and shoots him. And what that leads to is, of course, so the villain's dead, and the Punisher is there. Hang on. The Punisher is facing a life sentence, and then what that leads to is so eventually Natasha lets the Punisher escape. Movie ends. And that's really the simple plot of the movie. And what I liked about it was the anime action works really well for the source material. Honestly, Punisher anime honestly works really good with that. And I kind of really like how they do that. And I think it makes like it's sort of like, because here's the thing, when you think about it, a lot of anime is like superhero stuff. So it's superhero-y, like Attack on Titan or such. So naturally, when you mix the two, it works. Now, I don't say that like anime should be the only thing making animation, because trust me, that's not going to work well. However, I'm like, it's occasionally good for like a certain trying it out, like with Batman Ninja 2. One, it didn't work out that well, but Batman Ninja 2 is really good. And honestly, it really also depends on the character, because if you go with like Punisher and Black Widow, I think you can get away with. Some characters aren't necessarily going to work well with anime characters. But for right now, how about I ask you guys this? What Marvel characters do you guys think could work well for an anime? Yeah, we learned that the hard way with Avengers anime a few years back. Sally did. Yeah, that was a funny one because they made. Here's the thing. While it's okay, I kind of think that like it's a little too anime-y. Like when they announce all of their moves, like Captain America goes shield throw, and I'm like, yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I don't think it necessarily works well. And it all of a sudden got really warm here. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
Flame on. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good. So, yeah, we were talking about the movie. And so what do you think of this anime?
When I first watched it, granted, this is the first time since I've seen it, but I'm surprised how well Punisher and Black Widow work together. I am awfully surprised.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, they would, because they're both about morally ambiguously killing people. So that actually works really well. So that's actually really interesting how that works out. But yeah, the thing about this is it works because it uses all the characters that work with anime, but there aren't always a lot of characters where anime would work.
Captain Marvel. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, even though she is in this, but ironically, she doesn't talk, so she's actually much more much more fun. Tevia says Spider-Man for me works for anime, especially if he's an adult. Okay, you could. Well, Spider-Man anytime would work with anime because he's very fluid.
Yeah, the only hard part would really be the animation, but you could use an anime-inspired style with Spider-Man pretty easily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like arguably a lot of the anime, a lot of the Spider-Man animations like kind of cross over to that. But what characters do you think JJheat wouldn't work for Marvel animation for anime?
Deadpool, unless it's very mature rated.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Doctor Doom, you would have a Doctor Doom would just eat up the budget because of how gravitas the character is.
Yeah, exactly. But you could also kind of say that maybe Thor, maybe.
Again, we got to look at this both from a design standpoint and in terms of overall budget, because depending on what type of anime and what type of adaptation you're going for, these are the type of things you have to take into account. Like, for example, a character that's very street level could work with anime style pretty easily.
That is true. Tevia says we did get an X-Men anime a few years back. Yeah, that was really good.
Oh yeah, that was solid.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it can continue though because of like rights issues and all that stuff. Tevia.
No.
Can the Young Avengers work or don't work for animation style? No, I think they more work for a more kiddie animation style. What do you think, JJheat?
Agreed. It would just be too over the top, and it would just come across as edgy. Now, if you're going to make a younger, like TVY7 or Right at 10 Plus regular show, no pun intended, you could probably get away with it, because Young Avengers is it's a relatively modern concept. You have Teen Titans, which debuted back technically debuted in the 60s, but it got its big launch in the 80s. And you have New Avengers. Even Young Justice as an IP has gotten more traction than Young Avengers has. And Young Justice is just a 90s Teen Titans, if we're looking at it from an IP standpoint. It's a glorified rebrand. That's all it is.
Yeah, you're not gonna see a Young Avengers movie, no matter how much they try and say they're setting it up. Cameron says, so I see this movie came out in 2014. Was the Captain Marvel already out at this time? Because Carol was wearing the blue star suit, unless there was always been a thing in the MCU didn't create it. Oh, shoot, that was always her suit in the comics when she became Captain Marvel. And this is when she had the more like mohawk hairdo instead of like the actual like long hair that I think looks way better.
I agree. Her becoming Captain Marvel, at least in my opinion, was a relative. Sorry, I'm in the middle of dinner right now.
No, it's all good.
I would say it was more of a downgrade for the character because after she takes up the moniker after Marvel passes, which is a very good storyline. I highly recommend it. Carol Danvers peaks from a character standpoint. She peaks after taking on the moniker and going from Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel. She peaks at that point. It is straight downhill.
The Brian Reed run.
It is straight downhill after that. There have been some highlights here and there, but most of them were either ruined by editorial or by poor writing decisions.
True, I'll give you that. Cameron says, "Oh, I always thought the black leotard. It was before that was her Ms. Marvel suit, and then before that she had a couple of other ones, but that was like her Ms. Marvel / Warbird suit. That wasn't her Captain Marvel suit. I know it's confusing, but Marvel really confuses people with all these different identities." Tevia says, I think a character I think could work for anime is Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2099, I think you could probably get away with.
It would eat up a chunk of the budget, but it's pull-offable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the thing is, it's like you have to think with the animation budget in order for that to like work. And honestly, yeah, not anything in the future, because if it's in the future, again, yeah, that's going to take up a lot of the budget, and that leads to maybe them cutting corners. And trust me, you do not want that.
Nope. That's why we have the Across the Spider-Verse style, which is more of a hybrid between 2D and 3D. Excuse me, 2.5, but it works for what it is.
That's true. I'll give you that. But in terms of for this, I think the reason why that this works is because it's pretty grounded, so you don't have to like draw like a metric crap ton of like futuristic stuff or space stuff. I mean, that's why they save like the Avengers stuff until the ending of until the end part of the movie, because then you can divert it all in there.
I agree.
So let's see. What other questions do you guys have about the movie? It can be anything on plot, what other characters we think could work, whatever you guys think would be interesting for that.
I got something for the chat. They should have gone through and made that Batman Beyond movie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if you look at it, it looked fantastic. And they also had like a bunch of the Spider-Verse people on board. And I'm like, you can't tell me that would not be good. You can't tell me that would not like sell. Like, I'm sorry. There is no way that would not be popular. Even though it's Batman Beyond, but it's still Batman. So that would be enough to like get people on board. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Did you feel the villain for this movie as a whole? Because for me, the movie was mapped. The villain was just the typical comic book villain surface level. That's really what I felt.
You're not really there for the villain. You're there for the crossover in Black, since these two never really interact or team up together. You're more so here for the titular characters. You're not here for the villain.
Yeah, Cameron asked a question here. I want to ask JJheat, what do you think of the movie saying Frank and Natasha were in a relationship? And do you think that works, or should it be kept to this only? Were they in a relationship in this?
Frank is pretty much Marvel's Batman in terms of personality. Not in terms of his abilities, but in terms of personality. He'll never, modern comics notwithstanding, he'll never move on from the tragedy of his family from that hit. Frank will never move on from that emotionally.
No, he never will.
He just won't. But do I see these two being a deadly duo or teaming up a lot? Sure. They probably have teamed up multiple times in the comics, but they were very obscure. Heck, I think Natasha's teamed up with Bucky more times than she's teamed up with Marvel. I mean, Frank outside of events or tie-in issues.
Oh, yeah, particularly in the Ed Brubaker run, which was awesome.
We do need to do a retrospective on that eventually.
Yes, we do. Yes, we definitely do. We've been playing that for literally years. But yeah, so it's like the thing about this that's interesting, and I could see where you're getting that from, because to a degree, I see where people could think that like Frank and Natasha work together. JJheat, speaking of anime, just want we're not talking about the Devil May Cry anime, Tevia. Please stop. Actually, it's crazy that there hasn't been a lot of Frank and Natasha stories.
No.
Yeah, you'd think it would, right?
Outside of purely tie-ins or event comics, Frank and Natasha have hardly ever teamed up.
Mm-hmm.
Only a couple of times. That's the only way I can remember.
They barely ever interacted, period. So I'm like, what?
But yeah, if you are trying to pair the two from this movie, don't bother. There's no precedent for it. And Frank, okay, I know this is going to make Jared cringe, but I will say it anyway.
Oh, God.
Pairing Punisher and Black Widow is pretty much trying to make Wonder Bat a thing. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of like that because it's even less likely to happen for Punisher because, again, if Punisher moves on from his family and gets happy, that defeats the purpose of the Punisher.
And yeah, the more recent comics did rebrand the logo, bring Miss Castle back, and try to, this was never about us. This was about you, not you unable to come to terms with the grief and the tragedy of it all. And I don't even think Frank was even working with the Mafia leading up to his origin. I think his tragedy was just collateral damage, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is just tragic circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, yeah, it's so that's why he kind of can't have any romantic relationships. Or if you notice, he doesn't have relationships with a lot of the different heroes, period, because he likes to keep to himself because of what he does. Now, now the other thing is, I do like, by the way, Steve Blum doing the Punisher. Yes, like
perfect casting.
Of all the voice actors that you could cast for the Punisher, Blum has it because his voice has that gritty thing that really like sells how tough the Punisher is.
He could do a voiceover for an animated Batman movie if they ever contracted him for it. He could pull it off. Maybe not a good Bruce Wayne, but definitely a good Batman.
Yeah, maybe. I could kind of maybe see that. I think he's a little too gruff for Batman, I think.
That's fair.
I would honestly have to say, if I had to cast him as any of the Bat family, maybe he could play an older Jason Todd.
A little too. He's no Jason Ackles, but he could get the job done.
Who would you cast for him as a Batman villain?
Ooh, okay. Can we use mob villains?
Yes, of course.
Falcone.
Yep. And by the way, it's pronounced Falcone. That's the Italian pronunciation. As an Italian, I could say that. I'm like, actually, it's crazy. Yeah, there really hasn't. And it's like, it's because with the Punisher, I can see him as Heretic.
I mean,
have we seen Heretic since Grant Morrison?
Well, we saw a version of Heretic. Okay, you know what? We might as well have this conversation. The Bad Blood trilogy in the DeCamu is just an animated ripoff of The Dark Knight. Like, Bad Blood is literally Dark Knight Rises. The only difference is you have a main sidekick, a secondary sidekick, a femme fatale, which Batwoman is actually LGBT. That's the only real change in this dynamic. And Lucius Fox being replaced with Luke in the Batwing armor. And then it does tie into Grant Morrison's run a bit. But the main conflict in Grant Morrison's run was Batman Inc. versus Leviathan, and the whole thing culminating in their toxic relationship with Gotham caught in the crossfire. And Bad Blood is just Talia brainwashing a bunch of world leaders during a summit, which just so I don't even think it's even in Gotham where the summit takes place. Like they're just in a random city.
Yeah, it is like kind of weird on that. So that's why I'm like, yeah. But it's like, I could see him as Heretic, don't get me wrong, but it's like, I'm like this way, a more prominent Batman villain, because I could see him playing Two-Face.
Yeah, it's just, if you're gonna do an adaptation of Heretic, he's only good for one story. Yes, I'm saying one story because the Adam Glass run was god-awful.
Yeah.
And Heretic is just a pure man-child. You don't really need to pay extra to cast Steve Blum to do voiceover for a glorified man-child. If anything, it would be overdoing it, casting Steve Blum.
Yeah, I mean, they cast Travis Willingham as him in the movie, and I think that's about all you really need. He's not like one of those recurring Bat villains that you really need. I could see Blum playing even KG Beast.
You know, now you mention it, yeah, he could pull off KG Beast pretty easily. It wouldn't even be that hard for him.
Nah, all you'd have to do is like fake a Russian accent, which I think he should be able to do.
That's it.
and he has that tough, gritty, like KGB's voice you kind of need. But even with the so continuing on, so the other thing that I really like about this is, now I didn't notice this until I watched the movie today, because again, this was my first time watching this movie since I formed Comics League. So it's like, now that I know a lot more about the Marvel universe, I'm all of a sudden able to like see all the little Easter eggs like Madripoor and such. And it's I'm able to like appreciate that more. And that's one of the things that I really like about like, let's see, about like the a lot of these animes, because they had like a lot of different like, they had like a lot of like Easter eggs in there. Like Cameron says, also, I love Nick just coming to Frank and saying, "You killed my guy. You work for me now." Yeah, I know. Which again, that is such a Nick Fury thing to do. He's like, you killed the guy I was going after. Now you owe me, Frank Castle. The only thing that could make this better. Can you imagine if we get an anime of Frank when he stole the War Machine suit? Tell me that wouldn't be awesome, JJheat.
That wouldn't even need to be animated. You could actually make that live action. It's just Frank Castle going off for an hour and a half. People would eat that up.
Oh, John Berthel in an Iron Man suit? Hell yes! That needs to be like a special presentation.
That's your armor. That's your Armor Wars right there. If they ever get that project off the ground.
No, it officially got canceled.
Such a shame. And I had a strong pitch for it. Instead of everyone grieving the death of Rhodey, they're grieving the death of Tony. Then Frank Castle, since there's a lot of crime and chaos in New York, Frank just steals one of Tony's, an older model of Stark's armor, and just goes on a ramp and just cleans up crime a bit to keep things PG. And then you could have the whole miniseries be Rhodey versus Frank. It unites the TV side. It unites the main movies.
That's true. Now, and what's cool about that is like, you could say that like, oh, why didn't Frank use the? But I thought the Iron Man suits are like key to only Tony. Yeah, but Iron Man 2 showed you that's not really a thing anymore. Like when he literally steals the Mark II.
Hold on.
Yeah, go ahead. But it's like, so I'm like, that wouldn't necessarily be like a major determination or like a limiting factor, I don't think. But and plus, here's the thing: if you have like, you don't even have to like have like Punisher in the suit fighting like other robots and stuff. It can literally be, and you make it R-rated. It could just be him going into crime dens, just like rolling up and just machine gunning people from the air. You don't need it to be like that, like high concept. The only thing that would need like the CGI budget is the suit. That's it.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be pretty cool to have a Frank versus Rhodey fight?
Oh yeah, for sure. You could have that like the last episode, save like a lot of that, and it's Rhodey in like one of the older Iron Man suits that he's trying to fight back and get the suit. And then Cameron says, let's be honest, Tony never keeps his suits on lockdown, because how many people have stolen? Yeah, that's true. And how many people have used Iron Man armors in the past?
Not to mention, this is my one critique from Iron Man Iron Adventures. Yes, it's basically teenage Tony, Peter Park factor, all this and that. But my main gripe with that show is that in that show, Tony never went out of his way to legally patent the armors from the jump.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, even if you are factoring this as Tony, who gets his inheritance, who gets his stake at the company, and becomes Iron Man as an adolescent, even if you factored that, legally patenting the armors is literally the first thing Tony would do.
Yep, that's true. And you would think again he would key it so only his armor only he can use the armor. But I'm like, he claims he does. But again, I refer back to Iron Man 2 when Rhodey just even Tony, even Fury goes, he just walks in and just took it.
To be fair, Tony was dealing with essentism and how he was corroding from the shrapnel. And he had to
no, but it's like, how do you just walk in and just take the suit?
There were no lockdown protocols. It was literally just stowed away somewhere until Rhodey pretty much got entered the suit while Tony was partying.
That's true.
And yeah, that's my one main gripe with the Iron Man movie. Iron Man 2 is just Tony literally making a jackass out of himself for the first 2 quarters of the film.
Yeah, that's true. I'll give you that. Yeah, and then he learns a lesson, JJheat. But what other questions do you guys have? We'll make this a general Q&A. You can ask us about pretty much anything when it comes to news of the week, whatever you guys would like to talk about. By the way, I rate this movie a solid 8.5 out of 10. How about you, JJheat?
I'd give it an 8 solely because you don't really have a lot of gravitas with its villain. It starts out as a crossover between Black Widow and Punisher, but then it becomes a de facto crossover, whatever characters cameoing throughout. Like I said, you're not here for the villain. You're here for the crossover and the action. You're not really here for the villain. So it does weaken it from a story standpoint. But if I wasn't going to be picky, I'd give it between an 8 and 8.5.
Yeah, it's one of those two. It's still fun, but it's a solid 8.5. So other questions you guys have? Tron Ares trailer. I saw it. It looks pretty cool. I mean, I'm interested to see like how like the Tron people being in like I almost said man's world. That's the Wonder Woman fan in me. Almost in like the modern world would be like, who would you have chosen as the villain for this movie? Oh, that's a good question.
One that unites both. Kingpin would have been too obvious.
Maybe. I mean, the only other organization that I think could have done this would maybe Hydra, and then have Captain America be among the like Avengers that shows up.
Yeah, but then you would be openly admitting this isn't even a crossover film; it's just a cameo fest.
That is true.
That is the one downside to
but I'm saying swap out Captain Marvel and putting Captain America.
Oh, definitely.
Well, yeah, arguably you could use a lot. We could use a lot less of Carol Danvers, particularly from this period. So there you go. But so Jay, what villain do you think we could have used? Oh, Red Room or Taskmaster? Yeah, that kind of actually could work.
Yeah, that's actually pretty solid, Cameron. Thank you. Not gonna lie.
Here's an idea based on Cameron's idea. How about just a Black Widow Winter Soldier anime in this style?
Yeah, but you kind of have to use Hydra if you're going to make it a Black Widow Winter Soldier crossover. You kind of
well, no, you don't. Red Room is the villain organization with Taskmaster.
You could, but could the Red Room really carry their own movie as a villainous group? You would still have to use Taskmaster as a secondary villain, but could, from a marketing standpoint, Red Room carry a film? The Hand can carry a film. Hydra can carry a film. But Red Room, they'd probably be similar to the Marvel TV shows at best.
Okay, I can kind of see that. Or like in the Marvel universe, but I guarantee we'd have a better version of Taskmaster.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah, definitely. But what do you guys think? And in terms of what other questions do you guys have for us? If they had marketed the Black Widow movie better, they could have stayed alone. Well, yeah, and also if they didn't like screw up Taskmaster, like how do you flub a character or a villain that badly?
Now, granted, Taskmaster and Prometheus pretty much from DC pretty much stem from the same concept. The only difference is one actually uses technology as their gimmick and the other is just natural ability. But even then, it's not that hard to get a Taskmaster adaptation right. It's not that hard.
But it's like in that they literally X-Men Origins him by shutting him up. And I'm like, why are you doing his thing? One of his things is he taunts people as he fights them.
Oh, and he does throw wisecracks. He does. Not as much as Deadpool, but he does.
The minute I hear the director say, yeah, we had to change Taskmaster because we couldn't figure out like how to make Taskmaster like part of the Red Room. And I'm like, he's a combat instructor. All this requires this simple understanding of the material.
But then you would have to find a way to tie back to Velcroft. I believe his name, Velcroft's daughter, and how she was First of all, I wouldn't even try to make this dramatic reveal with Velcroft's daughter. Apologies if I mispronounced the name. Velcroft's daughter in the flashback with Budapest. I would have just had her be a plot device and you just have her be unalive from the explosion and have the main villain wanting revenge for his daughters. That be what the whole subterfuge with expanding the Red Room be about. And just how he's hiring Taskmaster while the Avengers are broken up post-Civil War. He's hiring Taskmaster as extra muscle to hunt Black Widow, to hunt Natasha Romanoff. They overcomplicated the plot more than anything.
Yeah, they did. And I'm like, why would they made something more complicated than it just needs to be? And honestly, at that point, I'm like, what is the point with this? Because it's just, it gets very like, you could have had a solid plot there. Hey, what's up, NJ? You could have had a solid plot there with Black Widow, but you screw the pooch that badly. And I'm like, that's one of the reasons why I'm convinced that the movie completely failed, is because of that.
Then you have to balance it. Then you have to tie the nostalgia, Natasha going undercover and her found family, even though they're completely estranged and it was just for a job. Like Red Guardian ends up being a bloke and goes back to prison. Natasha's foster mom is still organizing and leading the Red Room. She could have been a secondary villain in of itself if the plot didn't constantly write her out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you had a solid revenge, even if it was a postmortem prequel. This could have just been a simple revenge. Postmortem. This easily could have been a postmortem prequel with a simple revenge story, everything tying back to what went down in Budapest. That's really all the Black Widow movie needed to be. The adoptive family, that was only done to help set up Yelena as Black Widow's as Natasha's replacement, so she could take up the mantle after Scarlett Johansson leaves the role and Natasha's killed off in Endgame. If you just wanted to keep the foster family to set up Yelena, fine, but only use the flashbacks. Don't bring Red Guardian had no business being in the present day. You could have referenced him, but you could have saved him for a separate project entirely.
Yeah, or like had him be like under like I don't want to say frozen, but maybe like, what's the word? Maybe like, in stasis because of like a mission or something like that. And then maybe they awaken him briefly. But still, it's like that movie got too bloated real fast because I'm like, yes, it gave us Yelena, and I'll always be appreciative of that. However, when you look at it, it's like, it's still a Black Widow movie. That's what it is. You can't like distract from that.
I mean, okay, Black Widow and What If, that was just a follow-up from the Yellow Jacket episode.
Mm-hmm.
That was literally all that was. I mean, how does a subplot from the filler episode of season 1, where they have a gag of Howard the Duck and what's that actress from Two Broke Girls? What's that actress's name?
Florence Pugh.
Thank you. Basically, okay, in What If, there's the party episode. It's season 1, episode 7. It's the filler episode before the 2-part finale. There's a subplot. Thank you, Darcy. Where she plays Darcy.
Okay.
Where Darcy and a gag character, Howard the Duck, get married or pretty much go. It's basically a Vegas situation where they end up getting hitched in a drunken stupor. That's basically a premise. Mm-hmm. Then they bring it back. Then it goes into Howard. I don't want to spoil the show for anyone who wants an added investment to it, but What If just falls off.
To a degree, yeah. Do you think Poison Ivy would make a good Wonder Woman villain, specifically now that she's grown way too powerful for Batman and Gotham to handle? I would say, yeah. Of the villains, I think that like Wonder Woman could work that Ivy could work as a Wonder Woman villain, particularly how like Poison Ivy is like with the Eco Warrior stuff, and you can have Diana say, while I agree with your motivation, the way you're executing it is wrong.
Not to mention, let's actually have this argument. When has in mainline comics Poison Ivy done anything since she became Harley's post-Joker rebound?
I can't name anything.
Thank you. I mean, maybe a few schemes here and there, but nothing major that would make her considered a supervillain.
Yeah, I would say that. It's that, yeah, exactly. And Cameron brings up a good point. Nothing. Yeah, that's not to say she hasn't had like good stories. Like I've heard the Willow Wilson run going on right now is actually really good. However, it's essentially like
It's just
yeah, go ahead.
Harley. It's just Ivy and Harley. They have a lover spat. Ivy moves on. Harley makes a cameo every now and again.
Yeah.
I recognize when a comic is selling and is doing good, but you're not going to get a whole lot of investment, at least in my opinion, from the Willow run, strictly because because a lot of people who read or watch Poison Ivy are mostly there for the shipping with Harley Quinn. They're not there for the actual character herself.
That's a problem, because if you're only there for the shipping, you gotta support the character. That's the thing.
And which is also one of the major reasons I haven't watched Harley Quinn, the animated series, season 5. I appreciate the attempt to return to roots, but I'm not going to spoil the events of that season. I appreciate the pun, Cameron. Thank you. But I'm not going to spoil Harley Quinn for anyone who wants to watch it. But after they get together post season 2, it just kind of stagnant till it inevitably falls apart altogether, with the only real point of contention being the Valentine's Day special post season 3, which was just a smut fest from beginning to end.
Yep. That's exactly when I stopped watching it.
So if you actually had the stomach for, to each their own. I would only watch, if I was going to watch the Valentine's Day special, I would only watch it if my significant other wanted to. Me personally.
Mm-hmm.
But I just couldn't get through. I made one attempt to watch the Valentine's Day special, and God, the tie-in comics for that series are atrocious.
Yeah, I haven't read the tie-in comics because I like Life.
Don't. You're better off.
I don't even have morbid curiosity for those.
No. Hold on, I'll give you a quick excerpt. They did one issue where they tried to pair Damian Wayne. Listen when I say this. Where they tried to pair Damian Wayne with a civilian Cassandra Cain akin to Birds of Prey.
Okay, explain that to me again.
Okay, remember how Cassandra Cain wasn't Cassandra Cain in Birds of Prey? She was kind of just a random civilian girl.
What?
Yes.
This is bullshit. Why are you referencing that crappy movie?
Because the tie-in comic did. I mean,
No. I'm not blasting you. I'm blasting the tie-in comic. In which case, I gotta do this.
Why did you say that name?
Oh man. I'm just like, to actual comic fans, it's weird, but if you actually take the reference, if you actually get the reference in context, this is even worse.
Mm-hmm. Cameron says, honestly, Ivy and Harley at this point should just become regular civilians because, as you said, Ivy does nothing and Harley isn't interesting unless she's with the squad, and even that's getting old. And you got to stop trying to make her a superhero.
Anti-hero maybe, but it's just not. Not to mention, the point of Harley's story is not only a social commentary on domestic violence and abusive relationships, but knowing when to walk away.
Yeah, you don't go right into another arguably abusive relationship,
and then try to tie it with it. I'm just gonna put this in the private chat because I don't want to risk Jared getting demonetized.
Thank you.
I'll wait for Jared to respond to that.
Okay, let me see. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of Harley, do Harley and Ivy have chemistry? To an extent. Did they have an established friendship and BTAS in the DCAU? Yes. Were there interviews and references of Bruce Timm wanting to do more but had to maneuver around it due to censorship? Yes, but even then, Bruce Timm had to be reined in a lot of the time because, well, it's Bruce Timm. So I don't even think the censorship department was even a factor. That's just Bruce Timm being Bruce Timm. But back to my main point. The reason Harley and Ivy, at least objectively, does not work, because it still ties to Harley not emotionally over the Joker unless you completely force it. At least with Harley Quinn, the animated series, they gave Harley an arc leading up to that point. Granted, a poorly structured one, but an arc nonetheless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Tevia says, question, do you think that they should, that Harley Quinn should not have her own series anymore? I think they should take a break from it. I don't necessarily think they should permanently take it away, but should they take a break? Yeah.
Season 5, at least from what I saw, it was a bit of a mess because I'm not going to say they pulled a Legends and tried to play chicken with the higher ups, but you knew there was a good chance they weren't going to get renewed from season 6 due to all the cost cutting Zaslav was doing. So they tried to make this big wrap up. They even referenced some Rick and Morty nonsense with Ivy and Frank, and that's a whole mess in of itself. But yeah, I just don't see Harley and Ivy getting a season 6. I mean, Harley Quinn the animated series getting a season 6.
Yeah, honestly,
if it does, wait a couple of years. But I would just pull a Trouble in Tokyo situation and just do an epilogue movie / special.
Yeah. But what do you think about like her I think Tevia is also referring to like her comic series. Do you think she should not have her own solo comic?
Harley Quinn is one of the main characters out of beyond the Trinity they can sell consistently. So I still like you're going to have to give Harley something to do, even if it's just zany nonsense. So you're always going to have to give Harley something to do.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you on that one. Plus, again, that's why I think just give the character a break before you give her own solo things. You can still have her show up in like other people's like books, but don't give her own solo thing. I don't think it works. I think it's really outlived its usefulness.
But I actually have a question for you, Jared.
What's up?
Who would you cast as the Bat Family in the DCU Batman Brave and the Bold, or at least going into it?
Okay. Dick Grayson, Timothy Chalamet.
Okay.
Damian Wayne, the kid from Young Sheldon.
He could pull not so much of a brooder, but he could pull it off.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of let's see, what else? In terms of Red Hood, Jensen Ackles.
Yeah, he's an ideal choice.
In terms of Orphan, I don't know who I would cast as Cassandra because I haven't read as much of her stuff. For Stephanie Brown, you could do Chloe Grace Moretz or however you pronounce her name.
Yeah, it's hard to pronounce.
For Batman, that's a toughie.
I mean, the guy who did Reacher did play Hawk in Titans, even if that show was majorly flawed.
Batman.
And he did show interest in the role. He has the build for it, but whether or not he can pull off the performance remains to be seen.
He has that because when he plays Reacher, a lot of the ways he sounds dark, and he could do like that. If it were not for the Marston's contract, we could have had Wonder Woman anime shows instead of Harley. I hope the estate reconsiders something else. They probably will, NJ. They probably will, because honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if DC approaches them and says, "Hey, this contract, while we're fine keeping the comics in circulation, this other stuff with animation, it's keeping us from putting out actual Wonder Woman content."
I feel like it's DC. I just feel like it's DC and Warner Brothers just sticking with the status quo of keeping Diana in ensemble projects, because again, the Marston estate clearly stated that you can have you can still use Wonder Woman without having to pay a licensing beyond the main licensing fee, as long as you show her off in an epic or badass way. To quote Watchtower Database. And so as long as you did that, they wouldn't mind if you gave Diana a solo series.
Yeah, the way I hear it is that in the contract, Diana has to be the prominent thing if she's going to be in a Wonder Woman series. If that makes sense, because it's a Wonder Woman series.
And the titular character.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of that, I'm like, it's not necessarily solely the contract, NJ. It's a mix of the contract and WB and DC being lazy. So let's not put all the all the
blame in the
blame
Marston
on
estate.
the Marstons, because when you think about it, again, that contract kept DC from canceling Wonder Woman's book and never publishing it again because they're legally obligated to get those books out.
Not to mention the main reason you didn't get Donna Troy in Teen Titans 03 or Young Justice, because no Wonder Woman adjacent. Well, really, the demand by the Marston mainly applies to Diana, but you could tie it to the Wonder family in general. If they weren't going to have a prominent role in the wider dynamic, there was no point to pay a licensing fee. Young Justice mostly revolved around a de facto Teen Titans comprised of Grayson's Robin, Kid Flash, Kyle Durham Aqualad, Superboy, McGann, and Artemis. You could have tied Donna Troy Wonder Girl at the very least, but you were already paying for a licensing fee for Diana, who is already going to be a bit of a supporting character along with the majority of the Justice League, and you'd be paying a separate licensing fee for a second Wonder Woman character to the Marstons for a character who's going to be who's an ensemble cast and barely playing a role. They got away with it a little bit with Cassie Sandsmark in season 2, but that's also because the Justice League didn't play much of a role in Invasion.
Exactly.
So they were able to maneuver around it there.
So on that, I think that's a good place to leave it. JJheat, where can we find you and what have you got coming on your channel?
As for me, you can find me at JJheat Plays or JJheat75 on Twitter or X. Please stay tuned for our next collab on the New Direction verse or Heroes in Crisis. I'm already working on a practice script now. I should send it to Jared in the next few days.
Hell yeah. And then as for me, on Monday, Britt and I will be releasing Super Wonder Legacy episode 87, I think, where we're going to be talking about our the best Wonder Woman stories and runs. And then as for Under Two Capes, I'm going to be having comic book editor Aaron Sparrow on my show. And in terms of movie night, I'll get with Teladia to outline what movie he wants to do. All right. Stay heroic, everyone. Remember, Lois Lane is Lois Lame. She belongs to General Zod. Steve Trevor, Steve Never. He belongs 6 feet in the ground. Zoe is the Max about for life. I'll see you later. We are the Comics League. Bye-bye.